peanuts they needed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting for Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. I'd like to recognize with gratitude that the CVRD is on the unceded territory of the Quetzin, Malahat, Subasit, Halalt, Penelakut, Staminas, Layaxan, Paucachan, Dididat, and Pachidat nations, whose people have walked gently here for thousands of years. Before we move to the approval of the agenda, Mr. Robbins, are there any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for those that are joining us in the gallery and online, the regular board did actually convene this meeting earlier today, but they then resolved to go into a closed camera, and so we are resuming that already opened board meeting that was opened by the board, of course, at the earlier time. So per when you open, and those that are here that probably weren't when you first opened the meeting, there are changes to the agenda with respect to items under number 4, BA1 and BA2, the reconsideration of resolution from December 13, 2023, resolution 23-621, and potentially resolution 620, in addition to under section 6, delegations, representatives from Schnitzer Steel wish to address the board with respect to their application.
Thank you. So with those changes, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Staples. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Moving to item number 3, adoption of minutes, the minutes from the December 13th, 2023.
And the recommendation that those minutes be adopted if there's no errors or omissions, moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Nicholson. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Moving to item 4, that's business arising from the minutes, that's BA1 and BA2. We would recommend, Mr. Chair, that you table this so that you can go into a public input period and hear from Schnitzer Steel, your delegation.
Thank you. So move to table, moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Which then moves us to public input period.
Thank you. And based on the contingent in the gallery, I may look to the board for a motion to extend public input. Moved by Director Staples, seconded by Director Abbott. So we'll extend it for up to an additional 15 minutes. So it's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So we'll open our public input period. I just want to say, as I'm often want to do in situations like this, just a brief overview of the board meeting. As I understand, there's likely some interest in agenda items BA1 and BA2, which we've just referred to after our delegation. We want to ensure that members of the public and representative of the application are afforded opportunity to make representations to the board. What we do not want, however, are interruptions, jeering, or public displays of disagreement or the like. We all agree we want to create an environment here in the boardroom that creates an environment for people to speak regardless of their views. As such, the public will be afforded the opportunity to speak during our public input period as per our board's normal policy and process, and the applicant will then be afforded the opportunity to speak during the delegation segment of the board agenda. Following this, we will then consider items BA1 and BA2. And with that, we'll open public input, so you're welcome to take to the podium on any item on the agenda. Just press the blue button on the microphone to make sure the red light is on. And Mr. Robbins has his handy timer, and you would have up to 3 minutes. Ms. Benson, welcome.
Thank you.
Press the blue button on the microphone. Should be a blue button.
You call that blue? Okay.
Is it grayish blue?
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Do you want name and address or
Yeah,
what?
it's handy.
Okay. Okay, my name is Joyce Benson. I live on Drinkwater Road in the municipality of North Cowichan, and I'm here to speak today. I'm stepping first because it sounds like a bigger issue coming. I'm here to speak today about the agenda item C2 with regard to the letter correspondence from the Cowichan Minor Hockey Association. Not only was I a hockey mom, I was a team mom. And I'm very well aware of the homeless and addictions situation in our community because I help with Life on Wheels, which is outreach. I learned yesterday that the Monday night warming center at the Cowichan Community Center upstairs in the Heritage Hall was not available for the people that needed a place on a freezing cold, wet, miserable night, and that they were lined up outside waiting, but there were no staff apparently to accommodate that. That I have not verified with CVRD. I did phone earlier, but I didn't hear back. I'm very concerned because safety of our community has become a huge issue. There was a silent protest at the Municipal Hall last night outside. Concerned citizens that are fed up with what is and isn't happening. And so the warming shelter is a really big resolution part of the problem, but it needs to be maintained properly. And I understand Lookout Society is the hired entity that's to provide that accommodation. To hear that it was closed when I'm at home thinking, well, at least they've got 20 people have got a place to stay tonight, and to hear they're outside, left outside, does not make it safe for hockey players at 6 a.m. in the next morning or even that night. And the 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. is somewhat better than the 7 p.m., to 7 a.m. times that they usually have, because at least in the morning they're not kicked out onto the streets at 7 a.m. But 9 o'clock at night is also a very cold time. We must do better, and I look to our local governments to have input on how that is going to be resolved. That is not the location by our schools and our hockey children, and hockey capitals too, I hear, are not happy with it. So that's my input, is that it's a big problem. I realize that much is going on in our streets that's not okay. The Warmland Shelter and the OPS site are in the wrong location, specifically, and more needs to be done, and I do believe that we all need to work together to find the answers, and we can fix this problem, and these people are in desperate situations. So I'm just letting you know that I'm only one voice, but I'm very concerned about the hockey players, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing us to come forward. My name is June Ross, and I am Chair of Vancouver Island Water Watch Coalition, and I'm here concerning B1 and B2. And I'm just raising because I've become aware there was a letter from McCarthy Tatro to the board from Schnitzer Steel. He's a Schnitzer Steel lawyer. Our lawyer wrote, and I'm aware that everybody has not seen a copy of Noah Ross's letter, and I'd like to know why.
Sorry, this is public input, not question period. I'd have to check with staff, but
Because the promise is that it would go forward to everybody, and it hasn't. So I don't know whether I'm to cover off part of it here or
you
what.
can feel free to give your input. You do have, over 2 minutes remaining, so.
Okay, I'm going to just try to be very brief because I wasn't aware I was going to have to do this. Schnitzer Steel lays out background information which says it's relevant to its concerns with the decision, but which made the following errors, and it goes through a lot of the errors that they claim were made, and our lawyer has said that they weren't errors. Schnitzer Steel irresponsibly misstates the application of Section 37 and particularly 37.5 and 6 of the EMA to Schnitzer Steel's operations. And then what he's done is he's gone through and listed the areas, and he says, contrary to Schnitzer Steel's assertion in the letter, the CVRD zoning bylaw would apply to Schnitzer Steel's operations only until the Lieutenant Governor and Council orders the suspension of the zoning bylaw, which has not occurred. The intent of Section 37 is mainly to prevent municipalities from allowing activities prohibited by the EMA. That does not mean a municipality cannot have stricter standards than the EMA unless these are overridden by Cabinet itself. So I'm not going to go on because there's no point. I want to make sure that everybody here knows that that letter was sent. It was sent to Legislative Services with the promise it would get through to
And I
everybody.
can confirm that that was distributed to all board members.
It was?
Yeah, it's here.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to be clear, though, it did say in that letter that it was privileged and confidential, not for public. So that's what it says in the subject of the email, so, but thank you.
No, it doesn't say that. You sent it to me.
I've got the email that says at the footer that it's privileged confidential information, but thank you.
Well, he's our lawyer.
Okay.
My lawyer.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Fall. I live in South Cassidy. No pre-written script today, so I'm going to ad lib it. 3 little items. One is there's photographic proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that Schnitzer Steel has expanded exponentially on this site since the zone was established in flagrant violation of their non-conforming status. And if this board reconsiders their application for a new zone and it finally gets approved, that will legitimize all of that flagrant violation of the zoning bylaw. The other thing is, since 1985, there's been a million things that have gone wrong with this whole issue. A million mistakes by CVRD staff, previous board members, citizens, everybody involved. But I'm telling you, the decision you made last month is not one of those mistakes. That was the right decision. And just because Schnitzer asks the people of CVRD for a rezone, you're not obliged to give it to them. They can throw all the lawyers they want at you, but you are under no obligation to give them what they asked for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to take much time. I just wanted to say first, in 2017, the city staff, the CVRD staff, made a report, and it was very detailed. And the recommendation was originally made that the Schnitzer Steel, although a very valuable company to the community, was in a very inappropriate place. And the recommendation was that it was moved. And I think that I want you all to know that I'm so grateful, and I applaud you all for making the decision that you made last month. I really hope that you stick by it, and that you don't feel the pressure from a lawyer's letter and feel bullied into changing your mind. I'd also like to remind you that I am a landowner. I plan on living there forever. We love our land, we love our water, and that the tenants that are asking for this reconsideration are tenants. They are not a landowner. They will never likely be a landowner there. They are not personally invested in this. We are. We live there. So thank you for your job last time, and I hope that it sticks and holds. Thank you all.
Thank you.
There we go. My name is Brad Scaife. I'm a local business owner in town here. I also live out in the country. My concern is I'm a hockey coach for minor hockey. I also sit on the board of Cowichan Valley Minor Hockey. I have a young 11-year-old son who plays, who I coach his team. I also have 2 daughters that play. And I've grown up in the valley. The community center was there when I first started playing hockey. And when I was young, my parents, your mom and dad could drop you off there, and you could spend the day there, all day. What I see now is atrocious. It's scary, and I'm terrified for my daughters to go to a hockey practice with what's going on with the Warmland shelter being right there. And I understand you have to have a place for, these people need a place. We can't just abandon that. I understand that. But to put it right in the middle where it is kids use sports, you have a gymnasium, you have a swimming pool, you have a high school, and you have an arena, it makes absolutely zero sense to me. I don't understand what thought process would be like, let's put that right there. And from what we see and from other towns, we travel all over for hockey, and it's a problem all over our province. It's not just here. But right now, it's in my backyard, and it's affecting young kids and their safety. We need to do better than this, because that's not good enough. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Melanie. I live in the Cowichan Valley. I'm the business director for the Cowichan Capitals, the junior team in town, as well as a hockey mom of a minor hockey team. Same thing, I have an 11-year-old that plays hockey as well. My office is the Cowichan Capitals office, which is directly beside the warming shelter. So what I have seen firsthand with my own eyes is violence. During one of our games, we had an all-out physical altercation with the warming shelter patrons. The security guards did intervene quickly and immediately, but that doesn't negate the fact that it still happened. My staff members have witnessed this. We've had to keep our doors locked because we do not feel safe. I do not feel safe. At the end of a game, I have to go to the parking lot. I don't feel safe. So my option is to get one of the commissionaires or another staff member or a coach. However, I don't think that I should have to feel that unsafe walking from my place of work to the parking lot. We've had theft. We have had harassment. These patrons that are using the warming shelter are trying to sneak into our games and then swearing at us when we politely ask them to either buy a ticket or leave. The biohazards, not sure what it is that's on my doors in the morning, but it is definitely some sort of human excrement. Our elevator access during our games is no longer available where it should be. Our patrons now coming to the Cowichan Capitals games have to go to the other side of the building, go up an elevator, navigate their way through with signage, but it's still a huge inconvenience, and I think it's absolutely unacceptable. Just to get to our games, but then they have to do the same thing to either leave the games or go use a washroom. I don't think this is fair to them at all. What else have I had? The open drug use. There is, I'm not sure of the correct term, whether it's crack, meth, I don't know, I'm not a drug user, but they are smoking something out of glass pipes directly outside my office. We ask that people smoking nicotine do not smoke that outside the office, but yet when I ask the security guards, there's somebody smoking crack or whatnot right outside my office, I'm told there's nothing they can do about it. Why? Why can they not do anything about that? I think it's absolutely disgusting that I have to walk past that to get to my place of work. That's not okay. And then as a minor hockey mom, Same thing that Brad said. Our kids do not feel safe. I do not feel safe having my children. I should be able to drop my child off at the front entrance of the arena where he is doing his recreational health, wellness, being with his buddies. Why can't he grab his hockey bag and just go to his dressing room? Well, the dressing rooms are not safe because that's where thefts are happening, and I know this firsthand because we've had thefts from the Cowichan Capitals one down the other tunnel. So the blood donor clinic, when people are using that, they are going to use the washrooms. There's drug use happening in the washrooms. Not okay. The drug use that's happening outside of the facility and inside the facility, we need to do better than that. It's absolutely atrocious that as a citizen and as my children need to use the washroom, this is what's happening in there. And then to be told that there's nothing they can do about it. Well, there is something they can do about it. They can move the location. That is unacceptable to have this.
So you're well over time. I'm trying to give some latitude, but
Oh,
everyone gets
I'll
three.
keep going if you want.
I
But,
would say
yeah.
if you do want to share some more thoughts,
Yep.
if we go through the roll of the people that want to speak, you're welcome to come
Oh,
back up.
I'll probably just keep going, so I'll give the floor to someone else now. But thank you for listening. That's just my 2 cents.
No, thank you very much.
Do I press that? Okay. John Edwards, APC, Area H, Vice Chair, farmer, poet, etc. I have no objection whatsoever to recycling automobiles. It's a question of where and how. As a child in Cheshire in the UK, where the Beatles came from, I was traumatized by the destruction caused by years of Nazi bombing and its effects upon my family and relations. No one then thought much about the sanctity of the natural environment. To survive had been enough. Around that time, 1946 or so, the first small business was established on the lands that Schnitzer now rent. According to the maintenance of the non-conforming clause, it should have been made the same size and scope ever after. It hasn't, obviously, as aerial photos that Mike has can attest. Times change, and so should the laws change. Drinking water is a new gold and must be protected at all times. What was allowed in 1950 should not be allowed necessarily today, especially in a time of climate change. With particular reference to the lawyer's brief, which I have read, there's no reference whatsoever to Thomas Creek, a fish-bearing stream, even now, which once had its origin in a pool outside the loading dock to the airport, now covered by concrete, before crossing the Schnitzer rented lands and emptying into Oyster Harbor. Against all odds and pollution, it still is fish-bearing. This has been ignored by Schnitzer. At their public meeting staged in Aggie Hall last summer, I asked the representatives what they had done to remediate Thomas Creek, and I was laughed at, and they pretended not to know what I was talking about. Schnitzer, since 2016, has been asked to look into the Riparian Protection Act and has not done so. In British Columbia, a stream is required to be protected 30 meters on either side. They have not done that. Secondly, the brief I've read implies that the ALR approves of Schnitzer's application. It does not. The ALR can only request a 15-meter setback from its properties, as with my farm. It doesn't imply approval or disapproval. Finally, Schnitzer Steel boast in that brief that they won a myriad of environmental awards. Really? What about the $4.2 million fine they paid in Oakland, California? What about the myriad, to use their term, of fires accidentally occurring of tires on the Columbia, the Fraser, and woefully here in Area H in 2020? I'm not against recycling. It's just a question of where and when. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to all. Murray McNabb, 4659 Yellow Point Road. I'd like to speak on application number 03-8 RS. Quite frankly, it's laughable to have a legal firm from Thurlow Street in Vancouver tell the long-term residents of Area H what was happening at this site in 1963 or 1985. This is akin to me stating what happened on Thurlow Street in 1963 or 1985. The only difference is I did work on Thurlow Street in 1985. How did we get to this point? Ignorance, ineptitude, and intimidation. First, ignorance by the operators of this facility since it was deemed legal non-conforming. Ineptitude of CBRD staff and past
Right.
directors.
Mr. McNabb, if you're gonna slander staff, I'm not gonna allow it to continue, so please
Okay,
keep
I will
it
go-
respectful.
The past directors of Area H. Is that allowed?
Yeah, I don't think calling anybody inept is a fair characterization, but, I'll give you some latitude.
There have been a
but
lot,
please-
it was
please-
mentioned before, there's been a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
staff?
Please continue, but I think you understand where I'm coming from.
Sure. Intimidation by the operators of this facility towards CVRD staff. There are still properties at Area H where CVRD staff are afraid to set foot on. They do not go to those properties to enforce bylaws, and this is what's happened at this property, at this operation, since 1985. I was employed by a mining company in Vancouver, and they would pay for me to fly in and out of the Cassidy Airport. Many times flew over top of that property in the 1980s up to the 1990s. The size of that operation has increased immensely. There are air photos to document all of that. The letter from the lawyers then goes on to not slag, but mentions Director Acton, McClinton, Wilson, and Abbott for the statements that they made. And they were good statements and reasonable, but at the same time, it doesn't, we don't need to get the current user of the property to come forward and be involved. What we have to do is roll the operation back to the size and scope it was when this became legal non-conforming. The thing has expanded immensely, and it must be stopped. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have time for another person to provide input. Still have about 3 or 4 minutes left.
My name is Doug Catley. I'm from the Cassidy, South Wellington area. And the question has been asked by many of the people presented is what's gone wrong? And I just like connecting things. And I would suggest that our priorities are changing. They're smacking us straight in the face. It has to do with the homeless. It has to do with local farmers. It has to do with local people. And their priorities are being sacrificed in favor of corporate global priorities. And I see a change. I hear it more and more in the news, people saying, you can't solve this with privatization. We as the public have to take a different view when it comes to what are our priorities. Kids playing soccer, people trying to live in a clean area. So I commend you for what you did in December meeting, and I hope you'll stand strong. Must be difficult, must be very difficult. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We do have just enough time for one more speaker if someone wishes to give input.
Okay. My name's Tanis, and I live in Ladysmith, and I'm also a hockey mom. The other day, we received a message from our manager saying, we cannot emphasize enough how important it is that players are accompanied to and from vehicles during this time. This is in reference to dropping our kids off at the hockey rink. And I echo what the other parents did say. I think a lot of times we stand up here and a lot of people think that we don't understand. I have a family member that is homeless. I have been on the streets and I see what is going on. And I will tell you that almost every single one of them carry knives, machetes, and axes for their defense. And obviously, all of them, not all, most of them carry drugs that can be toxic and deadly in the smallest of quantities. Because I have a family member that is homeless and I am on the streets to be in his company, I have to work very hard to protect my safety. There are certain things that I will not do. And it just scares me so much to think that our children, we're now getting warnings as parents that we can't even just drop our kids off at the rink to go get changed while we go park the car. So I have compassion on both sides, but I think first and foremost is that we need to do what's right to protect our children. And I hope that you'll just consider this because it's not in the right location.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our public input period. That takes us to our next item, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Per the adoption of your agenda, you provided an opportunity under 6 delegations for representatives of Schnitzer Steel to make representations.
Call for the delegation from Schnitzer Steel. We will look to the board for a motion to extend the delegation period to 20 minutes. It's moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Abbott. All those in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, board members and the public. Schnitzer Steel Canada is the applicant for application number 03H16RS. As you know, the application was denied at the board meeting on December 13, 2023. The chair has directed the board to reconsider our application and vote again, and has provided Schnitzer an opportunity to address you. We're extremely grateful for this opportunity. To speak on the matter today and to answer any questions that you might have, myself, Jack Shepard, Regional Director, Nerez Kara, Senior Environmental Director, and Linda Schaefer, Environmental Operations Director for Schnitzer Steel are here. We are very cognizant that our application is of interest to both the board and the public. It's important to understand that we are not asking the board to grant final approval of the application today. We are merely asking it to reinstate the application and accept the staff recommendation that was proposed at the December 13, 2023 meeting. Our goal is and always has been to work collaboratively with the CVRD to achieve regulatory certainty for both Schnitzer and the CVRD in relation to our operations. We believe that we have common goals with the CVRD, including environmental protection that can be best addressed through the bylaw amendment process. The background. It's extremely important to go over the background of this application. It's been 7 years in the making. It is important to the board and the public understand the long history of this application, which was initiated in 2016. Since then, there's been extensive negotiations between the CVRD and the landowner, Cassidy Sales and Service, and Schnitzer. We have prepared a timeline of significant events since the initiation of the application, which is set out and is in Schedule A of the package. What are our common goals? Our common goals are the protection of the aquifer. It is clear by the meetings that we've attended and from what we've heard from the public, the directors share a common goal of the protection of the aquifer. Schnitzer shares the same goal. We have demonstrated our commitment to this goal by volunteering to make environmental improvements at the property, many of which go beyond what is required by law. For example, after the CVRD requested for us to pave certain areas on the property, we paved more than twice the requested surface area, creating a sizable impermeable barrier where our recycling activities are conducted. During the paving process, we installed various oil water separators and catch basins in order to treat and capture the stormwater runoff. We also lined our stormwater conveyance channels with filter cloth, crushed rock, hay bales, and oil-absorbing booms to provide additional stormwater protection. In addition to the improvements and protection measures implemented on the property, we have conducted extensive testing and monitoring. Those tests have been conducted by independent experts over several years with the oversight from regulatory bodies and health authorities. As noted in the timeline, after reviewing the results of these multi-year sampling program, the Ministry of Environment confirmed that the results were within allowable limits and consistent with historical background concentrations. Nonetheless, we remain willing to conduct further environmental monitoring and testing with the common goal of minimizing the environmental impacts of our activities. What does the covenant give? The covenant gives the CVRD regulatory jurisdiction, gives comfort, provides regulatory assurances for the public and for the board, provides oversight and governance. The success of this application always has and always will be in the mutual interest of both Schnitzer and the CVRD. Since metal recycling and auto salvage activities on the lands predate the CVRD and its bylaws, those activities are protected by the Local Government Act. As a result, Schnitzer is lawfully operating on the property. The application is not about whether auto salvage and metal recycling activities can continue. Instead, the application is about providing regulatory certainty for all parties. One of the main ways the application will do so is through the registration of the covenant on the title of the lands that will impose conditions on how the lands are used. The covenant will give the CVRD powers that it would not otherwise have over Schnitzer's operations. In denying the application, the directors have rejected the primary means by which Schnitzer and the CVRD can work together to the common goal of environmental protection. What's the evidence-based path forward? We believe that an acceptable compromise can be reached if the board stays the course recommended by its professional staff and continues to advance the application. As noted in the staff's recommendation, next steps include Schnitzer providing additional information for staff review prior to scheduling a public hearing, and revisions to the proposed covenant, which are to be drafted within 180 days. As part of the process of gathering requested information and revising the covenant, Schnitzer is willing and eager to address concerns that have been raised by board members and by the public. In our view, the proposed conditions and terms of the covenant address the environmental concerns that have been raised by both the board members and the public. For example, the proposed conditions in staff's recommendations include the preparation of an environmental management plan, a stormwater management plan, a fire protection report. They also require an independent expert to undertake a conditions and impact study.
Can't hear you.
The revised terms of the covenant would require the testing of existing groundwater monitoring wells every 6 months with semi-annual reporting to the CVRD. The covenant would also require the implementation of the works and measures identified by the various reports and assessments that are part of the information gathering process. If the board votes to deny the application, these conditions will not apply. There will be no information gathering process, and there will be no negotiations over the terms of a revised covenant on the lands. Schnitzer's operations will continue as they have since Schnitzer acquired the Cassidy business in 2011. Conversely, if the board reinstates Schnitzer's application, we believe we can address its concerns with the same flexibility and in good faith, and the good faith that we have shown through this process. We are not asking for the application to receive final approval today. We're simply asking that the board to follow staff's recommendations and advance the application to the next phase. We are confident that the process that the staff has proposed provides the best possible path forward for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking to Exhibit A,
Oh.
The chronological timeline. Wanted to ask the board if there are any questions about, specific questions about the chronological timeline.
So I'll give them a moment to find the portion of the material. It's not usual for a delegation to refer to our board and ask them if they have questions, but
Okay.
if you're done with your presentation, you're welcome to highlight items that you may want to highlight in your material, and then I can turn to the board and ask if they have questions for you, the applicant, once they've had that opportunity. So feel free to highlight anything else in your materials that you'd like to alert the board to, and then I can turn to the board and ask if they have questions for the applicant or our staff.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ramirez, anything that you would?
Yeah, I can.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of highlights that I wanted to point out that I've previously pointed out in other meetings. When we committed to paving a lot of the areas that the CVRD had identified, notably the unprocessed and processed end-of-life vehicle areas, we initially were asked to pave a certain portion, and we actually doubled the amount of paving that we provided, and basically installed a bunch of oil water separators and catch basins to capture any surface water runoff. We've got a lot of source control measures in place. The other thing, we worked very closely with the CVRD Planning Department on language within the covenant about testing. And then just to reiterate again, on the September 20th fire, we embarked on a 2-year drinking water and groundwater study that was reviewed with the Vancouver Island Health Authority, the BC Ministry of Environment. They all reviewed the data, and they came to the same conclusion that they were satisfied with the results, and no further testing was required. And subsequent to that, we're actually committed to doing additional testing. The Vancouver Island Health Authority has recommended a semi-annual groundwater sampling be done on site, which we're definitely open to. And there's some other initiatives there that were put forth by the Planning Department of the CVRD in terms of the other studies that Jack Shepard, our regional director, had read out earlier. That's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. So if that concludes your delegations to the board, I'll turn to the board now and ask if there's any questions for the applicant. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'm looking at, there's no page numbers on this particular one, but the section headed an evidence-based path forward. And the very last paragraph, the revised terms of the covenant would require the testing of existing groundwater monitoring wells every 6 months. I think I brought this up that I'd prefer to see that much more regularly on a quarterly basis. But one of the things that has come up in the past is that I have a similar situation in my area, and there is quarterly testing, but I have to keep pushing for those results and whether they've actually been done. What commitment do we have here that they're going to be done on time and presented on time without any kind of pushing from anyone?
My understanding would be if this application were to move forward, one of the conditions either in the covenant would spell out the sampling frequency. And my understanding was initially it was proposed to be done on an annual basis, but we were proactive and worked with VIHA, who recommended to be done semi-annually because you've got seasonal variations within the aquifer that you have to capture. So when it's dry, you won't have water coming through the wells to obtain a representative sample. But we're open to any sort of frequency of sampling.
Please, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I understand. That's why I'm asking about the seasonal. I didn't mention the seasonal variations. A quarterly one to me would capture that
Sure.
Information much more in much more detail. Anyway.
And it would be shared, to your point. There's no point in just having the information. You need to share the information. Absolutely.
And just, if I can may add, Director Wilson, one of the, I think the recommendations made by VIHA and BC Ministry of Environment is that we would have to provide that data to them and to the CVRD for the review and comment as well.
Thank you. Director Martman.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to provide the material as well and to articulate your position. I am looking through this. I think it reflects somewhat of my binder there. So thank you for keeping it a bit more condensed. My question, though, is there anything new that you've added in here? Is there anything that's additional that you haven't put forward in the application?
No,
There's nothing new in this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Got Director McClinton online. For those online, not in the building, just use your virtual hand because then it pops you up to the top corner of my thing. But go ahead, Director McClinton.
First, the chair, or question you, Chair, do my questions need to pertain like specifically to the application, or can I ask a general question?
Right now, we're doing questions for the applicant, but I can come back to you for questions for staff if you wish.
It would be to the applicant, but it would be a general question.
Yeah, go ahead, Director McClinton.
To the applicants, I'm just curious, I just don't have an opportunity to talk to you, with the clear, community pushback against this operation. Have you considered moving your operation and to a more suitable location, and what's held you back from doing that?
We definitely consider, all variables. And thank you for asking the question. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We've invested a lot in infrastructure for this site, working with the CVRD on that. As Nerez mentioned, over $1 million in concrete, stormwater, oil water separators. We've worked, hand in hand to, modernize the site to the ability that we can. As we mentioned in our last discussion about the application, we'd like to make things better, and we see this as an opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Looking to my colleagues, again, any more questions for the applicant before we move forward? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I want to thank you both for taking the time, and your colleague in the back there for taking the time to join us again today. So thank you for that, and thank you for your work today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Robbins.
If the board is ready, you have tabled reconsideration under BA1, and I just want to bring it to your attention, the motion that is to be reconsidered, and that is 23-621 from December 13th, 2023. That motion, it was moved and seconded that application number 03-8-16RS, that's 13271 Simpson Road, PID 008-903-603 be denied. For those that are here and online as well, this is for electoral area directors.
Thank you. And so as such, the motion is essentially on the floor as it was at the last meeting. So I'll go first to Director Nicholson. Oh, Director Martman, the director of the area.
Thank you, and thank you to my community for showing up. Well, thank you to Schnitzers as the applicant, for having a chance to really say their piece. And I made two little notes here for myself. One is breathe, and the other one is take your time. So, with the chair's patience and your patience. I left off the last meeting talking about pristine lakes and about how Area H has a pristine lake, but it's just below the surface. It makes me change my vision of our community in a small way. I always knew there's precious water there, but now I have a sort of a vision of that. And in fact, if you just dig off about 30 feet, you're going to have that lake. But I've listened really carefully today, and I think, this is coming down to property rights versus protecting an environmental gem. And it's really weighing those things out. And it's not an easy one. I think I've listened to other directors say this is not an easy decision because of that sort of push and pull between those two issues. But when you come to the decisions of today, they aren't like the decisions of even a couple of years ago. Water is like the precious commodity. And I hate to call it a commodity because, we all are water. And so it's really about, I think, recognizing just that it has value beyond dollars. And it has value to my community. This is an aquifer that's highly vulnerable. And if it's contaminated, it would be spread very quickly. I changed from last time I used the word transmissivity. That what it means is that it gets spread very quickly in this aquifer. And so this comes down to what is this decision? This is about land use, and it's about getting the zoning right over our pristine lake. A zoning amendment locks this in perpetuity. I practice that one. But it's, how do you put that in perspective? And last night I was at my, again, Hulkaminum language class, and, they talk about the importance of language. And it got quite emotional because they feel like the First Nations that I talk to are losing their language. And I go like, wow, it's from a white person's perspective, it sounds sad, but it's more than sad. It's a profound loss for them because they believe they will communicate with their ancestors. And how can you communicate if you don't have your language? Which made me think going forward about the generational impact of our decisions and how can we communicate to the future? We think of ourselves here, the future there. But in many ways, through a First Nations lens, it isn't separate. We will be talking to our future generations in another life, another time. And so I guess what my idea is that we aren't in isolation in our thinking today. Our thinking is of the future. And thinking 7 generations, 14 generations, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years ahead. This really comes down to the ultimate question about whether this is a suitable location, suitable use for this location over a highly vulnerable aquifer. And I will be voting to deny this application because of that. Thank you. I do not think it is.
Thank you. Folks, I appreciate your respect for Director Martman's comments, but please try and, thank you. We want to keep it open for all perspectives. Director Acton, I have you online. Director Acton, you're still muted. Maybe I'll come back to you for some, we still see your microphone is muted on the screen. There you go.
That would help.
Yeah.
My goodness, how many years has it been? Thank you so much. In some way, I'm really glad that this application has come back again. I've been a part of this decision for a long time, not as long as some, and a little longer than others. And like it's been said, it's not an easy one. And when this recently came to committee, I heard everything, and I've heard everything today, and it was great that we had that opportunity to have it at committee, and there was a lot of things said at that meeting, and they really sunk in. And then at the board, I had the opportunity to change my vote to denial. And today, you know, we've had a few weeks to sleep on it, and I'm still really confident with that decision. I am looking at the 100 years, the 1,000 years as well. And normally, this is an interesting situation. Normally, this kind of business would be great by an airport. And when that decision was made, it was probably a good idea. And nowadays, we have more information, and it's no longer a good idea. So I'm going to be voting for denial based on the land use of today and the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nicholson, and then Director Deck and Director Abbott.
Thank you. And thank you to Schnitzer for coming and giving a presentation. I think we often play this game of trying to mitigate environmental damage. And I think in this particular case, with such a vulnerable aquifer and such an inappropriate choice of land use from the very beginning, I think we need to try and start moving to a different kind of an approach with these things. And it is super challenging. This is not the only type of site in the region where we have high-risk activities happening. And I am very concerned about water and the environment. So I definitely think that locking this into a zone that, although it does its best to mitigate risks, would not be in the best interest of the future. And I am really pleased that the community feels so strongly the same way that I do. So I think that I feel pretty comfortable with my decision, and I have been here, this is my third term, so I have been here since the beginning of this application when we started, and it has always been a challenging conversation around the table, and it continues to be challenging, but I feel comfortable with my decision to deny.
Thank you. I have Director Deck and then Abbott, and that's all I have on my speakers list today. And Director Morrison and Segal.
Thank you, Chair. In reading the correspondence, one of the sentences that jumped out on the page was from Schnitzer. Nonetheless, we remain willing to conduct further environmental monitoring and testing with the common goal of minimizing the environmental impacts of our activities. And I guess, like Director Nicholson, minimizing or mitigating just doesn't seem appropriate. It seems that we need to do more. And so you know, the emergency in 2020 just says to me that emergencies, it's not possibly not a one of, right? So as aquifers are under increasing pressure from drought, population, and land use, we have to just make a decision to protect them in the best way we can now, which I believe, as our staff said, the proposed covenant would not be required by the CBRD if this application is not approved. However, the insights that might be gained through the proposed covenant's monitoring program are themselves not a sufficient rationale to proceed with an approval, because the other provincial agencies may have the ability to require or access this information, including the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. So I feel confident in denying this proposal that we would still be able to be assured of monitoring and testing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Director Abbott, then Morrison and Segal, and then Wilson and McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the well-reasoned and well-prepared presentations by both the opponents and the proponents. I sense that we face a paradox. Here we see an organization dealing with the current bane of our civilization, and I say that's the automobile. we're facing climatic conditions all over the world. And it's paradoxical because we all drive vehicles. I don't think any of us don't. And they have to be disposed of at some point in their life when they hit that end of life. But it's sitting on top, this process, this industry is sitting on top of another precious resource that we depend upon, which is water. And I cannot help but think that such an industry, while needed, while paradoxically needed, needs to be relocated closer to a seaport, closer to where it's ultimately going to move off this island. I regret the investments that the proponents have put into this property. At the very least, it should be scaled back to the scale and scope that they took over at the time of taking on the tenancy. But at best, it should be relocated not above a water aquifer of this value. So like others, I'm persuaded to push for denial.
Thank you, Director Abbott. I have Directors Morrison, Segal, Wilson, and McClinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Easy day today, eh? Read an awful lot of material. A lot of it has just recently come in. It's been a lot to digest. Listened intently to the community as they've shared and reshared some of their thoughts. I want to thank Director Martman for his diligence and hard work on this and that of all the electoral area directors. I think it's important to note that at our last meeting, when there was, I think it was a pretty unanimous vote to not move forward with the list of recommendations that was agreed upon or move forward at committee. It was my perspective that there needed to be more done. There needed to be a greater level of protection, whether it's increased monitoring. I didn't know exactly what that would entail, but it was clear amongst all of us that we're considering it and debating it, not only at committee, that the package that was before us wasn't going to meet the standard. We're all here about protecting the aquifer. And so when that was soundly defeated, my sense was that it would send the applicant and staff back to further consider some of the concerns that were expressed not only at committee but at the board. So the surprise for me, and we're dealing with it now, is the motion to deny. And there's a finality in that we don't end up having any further discussions with them if this application is denied. We don't have any further opportunities to have those enhancements to be included. And it's, the conversation ends. And I know that it's not within our purview to compel an applicant to move their operations. It's not within our purview to do a lot of things. But one of the things that we could continue to do, if it wasn't denied, was continue to talk and to seek greater assurances and greater protections for the aquifer. So it's about land use. It's about assuring the long-term health of the aquifer. And by voting to deny, in my view, from where I sit, that will shut down the conversation. There will be no further role for the CVRD in this, and it will go to the provincial government, and whatever manner of operation will continue. So it's a really hard decision as to say, essentially deny and wash your hands of it, or keep talking. And that was the rationale behind me voting against denial at the last board meeting. My sense was there was a willing participant in the form of the applicant to continue to work towards aquifer protection. And if we as an organization are to deny this, in my view, we stop. So I'm not indicating one way or another as to how I'm going to vote on this one. I'm vexed by this. It's clean water for future generations. Yes, that's part of it. I'm a believer at continuing to discuss and negotiate with the people that are coming to us to ensure that they can do, it's a like-minded goal. We want to protect the aquifer. Yeah, and the last point is, and I kind of referred to it, is if we deny, there will be unintended consequences, and we don't know those yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to my next speaker, I'm going to just casually and sort of gently warn gallery, if I can hear you up here, that's really not acceptable. Making commentary about people's comments around the board table serves to me as some sort of intimidation. So I appreciate all perspectives, but if you're going to have ongoing commentary of directors' comments, I'm going to ask that you be removed from the gallery. Okay, so I understand we all have different perspectives, but I think that if we can listen to everybody's words, they're all coming from the same place. Next, I have Director Segal.
Thank you, Chair. I'll echo, like everyone else has said around the table, this is incredibly challenging. A lot of information to take into consideration, and I appreciate Director Morrison's history and experience and greater understanding to how these processes, roll out locally and provincially. But for me, it still does come down to, I just don't consider light industrial to be a suitable land use for this location.
Thank you. I have Directors Wilson and Director McClinton to close unless there's others that would add more to the discussion. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking from a position of shared similarity here of the concerns of the residents regarding the protection of the environment and the future generational impacts that this might have. I've always said that protection of the aquifers is an absolute priority. Area C, Cobble Hill, and adjoining areas sit above one of the most productive and pure aquifers in the south of the CVRD, serving in excess of 15,000 residents. My efforts to protect that aquifer from the possibility of contamination from external sources are well known and documented in my director's reports in the public domain. The biggest problem that I have found is that of jurisdiction. In other words, who is responsible for protecting this resource? Over and over again, I am told province, province, province. But to be perfectly frank, the province has not been the most involved partner and seems to view us as small fry and an annoyance of no real consequence. If protection of the Cassidy Aquifer is our prime consideration, then we locally must be fully involved in this endeavor by being an integral part of it with an enforceable covenant, otherwise nothing will be done. It's therefore with great sorrow and reluctance that I'm not in favor of denial.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. As people said, this is a tough one. I changed my mind once on this from committee to board, but I won't be changing it again. I mean, both of these options are, terrible, personally. And my personal opinion, I think the tenants should have moved a long time ago. I understand they've invested in it, but that's not my prerogative. I just don't think it should be there. The public doesn't think it should be there. And, my original reason for voting for it, I found some of those improvements that were suggested really tantalizing and sort of that short-term, fix, but, without an end game for this operation to be moved, I mean, that's just where I came on. And the fact that the owner is not a part of this application in any way, CVRD doesn't have first right of refusal, all those sorts of things. It's a no-brainer for me. So I'll be voting to deny.
Thank you. That concludes my speakers list. If anybody would like to speak again, I'll give you the opportunity. Of course, that is open to all directors, but the vote is electoral directors only. I'm not seeing any additional hands, so the motion on the floor to deny the application, I'll ask Mr. Robbins to read it again, is on the floor, and that's the motion that I'll be calling the vote on. Mr. Robbins.
The motion for consideration, it was moved and seconded that application number 03-H-16RS, that's 13271 Simpson Road, PID 008-903-603, be denied.
So I'll call the question for electoral area directors only. All those in favor? And opposed? Opposed, we have Directors Wilson and Morrison. The motion carries. So therefore, as a result of that motion being carried, there is no requirement to reconsider the other motion. So that concludes our reconsideration process. We'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll come back just after 3 o'clock. All right, folks, if we can take our seats, we're back in session. I know we're waiting for a couple of directors to take their seats or to reappear on camera, but we do have our quorum here. Our next item is report of the chairperson. Although I don't have a report, I do want to say Happy New Year to everyone, both in the gallery, in our communities across the CVRD. I do hope that people had a safe, happy, and healthy holiday season. I also recognize that for many in our communities, that may not have been the case. I know in Ladysmith there was some tragedy over the holidays, and I know it's really challenging. What we see in all of our communities throughout the CVRD. I know our board and our staff are very compassionate people that work to not only provide a safe work environment, but also to take care of those that are less fortunate than all of us. We often come to friction points in all of that work. But I know that our board and our staff members do everything they can every day to uphold a kind and principled view of the way that we conduct our work. And I do get sort of defensive or protective of those of us that we work for, which are our community members, our staff, and our colleagues around the board table when challenging issues come to the forefront. But I think that's one of the things that we all face in the roles that we have as elected officials, especially in the new world we live in with social media, is to try and balance all of the responsibilities that we have and our compassion as good people. So I just want to say to my colleagues, both at the staff and the board, I'm so thankful for all of you. I do hope you had a good holiday season, but I know that we're here again today with difficult issues to deal with, some of which are too often beyond the scope of what we're used to dealing with, and often outside of our legislative powers. But we do what we can within the scope of our responsibilities and our jurisdiction every day to hopefully make people's lives better or mitigate the challenges that they face every day. And I wouldn't want to sit around this table with anyone else or work with, I don't think there's a better group of staff out there to work with, because I know they all approach their jobs and responsibilities the same way as we all do around this table. So with that, we will move on to our next item in the agenda. Mr. Robbins.
We're on to Section 8, correspondence. This is a piece of correspondence from the Cowichan Valley Minor Hockey Association with regards to the Emergency Warming Center. This is placed on the agenda for your direction, potentially.
Thank you. I see Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the kettle to the fire, so to speak, from our previous item to this one. Again, a difficult position to be put in by a local government. Legislatively, we are obligated to provide a warming facility for those who are marginally housed. And unfortunately, after looking for every other alternative within the Cowichan Valley, we reluctantly chose this as the location. Personally, I believe that it is in the wrong spot, but that is only my personal opinion. I took the advice of staff who had brought forward their concerns, not only for the safety of the people who work there, but for the safety of the users of that facility as well. So I think it's imperative that we do all we can to protect everyone within the community, including those that do need a place to stay warm, especially considering the weather forecast in the upcoming days. We don't want to sit around here in a month and hear about tragedies that have occurred because there was no facility for a warm place to stay. So we must do what we can within the parameters of our capacities to provide that and to provide the safety for those who work within the facilities that we provide. With that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Director Nicholson?
So I concur with Director McGonigal, but are we going to have an opportunity to discuss this farther down in the report section?
Through to staff, where do you think is appropriate to get into? So I know we do have a report further in the agenda, but we also have this correspondence for direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Nicholson. It may be appropriate at this juncture, so it looks like Cowichan Valley Minor Hockey is asking some questions in their correspondence that the board may choose to provide some answers to or not. That's obviously the board's prerogative. Later on down on the agenda is a report from staff that is provided for information on the impacts to the Cowichan Community Center and the Emergency Warming Center through December. So that report later on the agenda is for information. This one's ostensibly for direction.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Well, so I guess I'm thinking that maybe we should have that discussion and then come back to this one.
Yeah, I was just going to say that perhaps we combine the two items essentially because they're obviously related. And I'd like to ask staff after we have the discussion both on the letter and on the report about some alternatives that we may be able to bring forward. So I wonder if it's okay with the board if we ask Mr. Elzinga and his team to bring forward that report now, and we can deal with these two items together.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Director Staples, moved by Director McGonigal. All those in favor? None opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So, Mr. Elzinga, do you want to open the discussion on that item?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. There are other staff in the room that may speak to this as well, including Mr. Rob Williams, manager at the Cowichan Community Center. This was just an introduction to a report for information. So that report that was written by Mr. Williams and put forward by the Community Services Department obviously speaks to some of the impacts around that. So without going into all of the different impacts, there's a number of incidents and situations that were experienced experienced by the center. There is an attachment which outlines some of those incidents in detail. It's presented for the board's information.
So I'll turn to the board for discussion and maybe questions through to staff. I will say, first though, in response to the letter from the Cowichan Valley Minor Hockey Association, the Cowichan Capitals, I think it would be suitable for the chair to provide a response based on our discussion here today and the decisions that we make. So I'm willing to take on that task without the need for necessarily a motion to do so. But once we conclude our discussions and any resolutions that may be passed during this discussion, I can use that to inform a response to those who have raised the concerns, including our staff. So I'll go to our board members. Sorry. Director Nicholson.
Okay, I'll start.
Thank you.
So I think we agree that it never was, a good, it was the only choice we felt we had to get going on putting an emergency center in place back in December. We recognize that it's posing even more challenges perhaps than we initially thought it might in our optimistic way before Christmas. So I guess what I'm asking now is, do staff have other opportunities or options for moving forward? And I recognize that cost is a significant issue because we will bear the costs as a regional district likely for anything. We won't be reimbursed by the province. So I guess my question is, what are the other options? Could we maybe review those again?
Through to Mr. Elzinga, that's what I was just asking Ms. Miles Wilson about, was being able to bring forward those alternatives.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, through to the director, and just for everyone's information, we have background where the board resolution of November 29th provided the following direction for the Emergency Warming Center, that the Cowichan Community Center Heritage Hall be used as an overnight warming center from December 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. That's the background for this discussion. The analysis part of this is with the impacts that have been outlined in correspondence to the board from the Cowichan Capitals Junior Hockey Club, the current correspondence to the board from Cowichan Valley Minor Hockey, the staff report on December impacts from the Emergency Warming Center. Staff's recommended resolution is that the board directs staff to investigate the lease of a commercially available space until March 31st, 2024 for use as a regional warming center to mitigate impacts to the CCC, and that the board directs staff to provide a cost-benefit analysis for this option. And just a reminder, this motion is predicated on an additional expense to the CVRD for facility use, and that there would be no temporary use permit or community consultation regarding the location. Alternatively, the board may wish to reconfirm that the CCC is the location of the Emergency Warming Center until March 31st, but communicate confirmation that the Cowichan Community Center is a short-term solution. The board should be aware that due to needs to maintain safety, additional security would be contracted every day, not only on days where the Emergency Warming Center is open, as was put forward before, and additional costs would be borne by the Function 420 budget if not recoverable through Emergency Management BC. So alternative motions could include that the Cowichan Community Center not house an emergency warming center after March 31st, 2024 for at least a 5-year period, and that a permanent home for an emergency warming center in the Cowichan region be identified by June 30th, 2024.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank our staff for the resilience during a really challenging time, as well as, and I mean all of our staff at the CCC, as well as the staff of the CVRD. I do have Directors Douglas and Staples on the speaking list. I believe Director Douglas wanted to move a recommended motion.
Just the first component of it.
Okay, thank you. So that would be that the board directs staff to investigate the lease of a commercially available space until March 31st, 2024 to use as a regional warming center to mitigate impacts to the CCC, and that the board directs staff to provide a cost-benefit analysis for that option. And that's been seconded by Director Istash. I'm going to go to Director Staples next on my speaking list.
So I support the motion, but I'm just curious about something additional that actually speaks to the latter part. So one that until such a location is identified, that just a second. Until such a location is identified, that if there's a need to increase security at the CCC while it's open, that also take place. And then in addition to that, we move forward with finding a permanent location by June. So if that's a possibility of combining those somehow.
Thank you. Actually, I put myself on the speakers list next to say almost the same thing. So, Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through to Director Staples. So it is anticipated at this point from the latest correspondence that I've seen is that the warming center is anticipated to be open at the Couch Community Center through approximately next Tuesday because of the weather impacts, which would include the security, which would be recoverable through EMBC. Once the weather increases beyond the criteria, that's when the CVRD would be on the hook for the additional security. So everybody is clear on that. So I fully concur that we have no other option than to have security every day because of the nature of what's happening. So I appreciate the amendment. I also appreciate the second amendment to look for another location as of June 30th.
I just wanted to make sure that those amendments were seconded.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, considering that we've heard from staff that those are appropriate, they've been seconded by Director Segal and a number of other directors. So now we have the amendments on the floor. So basically, we're combining the options. So we're not combining the options. We're basically adding that the community center would not have a warming center after this year. Sorry, what did you move then?
No, so
The additional security.
So the additional security, as required, and that we find a permanent location, work to find a permanent location until June. But those would be the only two pieces, because I think to presume that, there may be a location, what if something happens and one isn't found? We still have to have some backup location, and not saying that this, we just don't want to end up with nothing, if that is where we get to. Recognizing that, I trust that there will be a strong push from the emergency response and staff here to ensure that we do find a location. I think that one of the challenges around all of this is that there's been, groups of people working to try to find a location. We've had locations come to council that have been turned down. We've been through so many different locations over the past number of years. And so to have something permanent, if that is the direction from here, that this body now being, able to lead that, I think is really important. And that's a step that has been missing, and for a number of reasons. And I don't want to just add in those pieces, not because I don't support them, because I hear what you're trying to say, and that, it's just that I know how challenging it has been to find a location. And we don't want to end up next year having the same conversation we're having now, having to overturn possibly that decision. So that's why I just wanted to simplify it. And part of that conversation also has to look at TUPs for a permanent location. How does that work and how does that look? Because the chances of it being in the CVRD are probably fairly slim, but those are further conversations to have down the road. So that's why I just wanted to simplify the motion for now. Thank you.
Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One additional piece of information, and I do invite Ryan Wainwright to come up to the microphone as well to speak to the fact that we've been working within the parameters of 2 provincial funding programs. And some of what we're putting forward here allows us to look outside the box a little bit when we start talking about commercially viable locations. And so that may assist in finding a permanent location that hasn't been on the pathway before. So I'd like to see that confirmed by Mr. Wainwright if I could.
This is my easiest experience so far. Through the chair of the board, yes, I can confirm.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got Director Acton online, but I did want to speak to it. I have myself on the speakers list, and then I'll go to Director Acton. So thank you, both Directors Douglas and Staples, for bringing forward a motion that I think speaks to the challenge that we're facing, but also addressing the longer term and providing more mitigative resources in the meantime. You know, and this isn't necessarily an indictment, but I think it needs to be understood that we're being put in this position, local governments, through legislation that was passed that requires us to do this. And that doesn't mean that I don't have the compassion that we should also do this. My frustration is that they're loath to provide adequate funding to do this. Local governments are already strapped with responsibilities that we're not ideally suited to provide. We're being asked to provide these services now. We all have the compassion and the willingness to do that. We just need the resources to be able to do that. We're also in the middle of budget, and we're already challenged, extremely challenged, and you see stories all over this province about how local governments are drastically increasing property taxes to comply with various regulations from senior government without providing the revenue that we need to be able to do that. That being said, I am proud of this organization for saying that we know that we need to do this and we will do this, not regardless of financial implications, but recognizing that there's cost and benefit and that we do need to make those investments regardless of the funding being provided by the senior levels of government or not. So I just want to say that to our staff publicly, because I know I've said it to our management staff privately, our board is very supportive of all of our staff, and we want them to have a safe and friendly environment. To our community members who come, I also grew up in the area and could get dropped off at CCC, and frankly, I wandered the halls between guitar lessons and going down to the pool when it was there or whatever, and never had a concern for it. And unfortunately, the way that we are living now, the way we're unable to properly take care of those who need care, leads us to feel unsafe in our communities, and that's a failure of all levels of government, but frankly, levels senior to ours. And I'll leave it at that. I've got Director Acton.
Yeah, so I guess I don't have a really good understanding on the legislated part. Like, I understand that the province has legislated that we have to provide this service. And besides not having it, what is the consequence if we just said we don't have the resources and we don't have the money, that we're not providing it?
Mr. Wainwright, do you want to speak to that?
Within the new act, there are significantly enhanced compliance and enforcement provisions that didn't exist in the old act. So that on paper is a consideration. The other consideration would be simply being directed by the province, either through a ministerial order to comply with the direction of the minister to provide this service. It would be up to the board to determine how they might respond to ministerial direction to do so. Obviously, there is the underpinning of the fact that this is a gap in many communities, including our own, to provide this service. So,
thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Director Acton?
Well, it still didn't really tell me what the real consequence could be. I think we didn't have a choice, but we still made the wrong choice. And at this point, I wish we could just not even provide the community center as a resource, and allow the province to figure it out, or whether it's the police figuring it out, creating a center where, and even, we talk about, losing somebody who's homeless. Not everybody who's homeless is coming. So that could still happen, but we are putting a lot of people's children, and I heard all the people who spoke. We're putting a lot of other things in, and staff in harm's way, that I don't think any amount of security is going to fix it, and we're causing a congregation to just keep growing in that area, and it's only going to keep getting worse. So I would actually like to backtrack the whole decision and let the province do that. Then send a ministerial order, and like it's not a solution. And maybe we have other organizations step up and help solve the solution. We don't have the money, we don't have the resources, and I just think that we've made the wrong decision, and we go with nothing at this point. I know I don't have the support of that probably, but that's where I stand.
Thank you. Director Staples.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to speak to right now, I'll focus just on thanking the staff, and I really want to thank you, Ryan, for all of your work on this, since, you know, it's only been a few months now since this new direction came from the province, and you dove right in and really took the lead on a very hard and challenging thing. And, you know, Mr. Elzinga and all of your staff at, and the staff here too, Danielle and everyone, we all understand that this has been a lot for everyone. And we understand that this is a lot for the parents and for the people at the rec center. And in addition to that, it's also just a lot on community. I mean, so first I just want to thank all of you for everything that you've done. And to the staff who are here, to Rob and everyone at the center, thank you, because I know that this has been challenging, and this isn't what you're trained to do or to deal with, and this is a lot on everyone, and I just want to acknowledge that. And we're in this position, as has been mentioned, where there are new directions that we have to comply with, and going through the process of getting whether the province tells us we have to do it or we're doing it because we know that that's what it's going to come to, it's come at a cost to everyone. And it comes at a cost to the people who are facing and living in homelessness and with addiction challenges and mental health challenges in a whole different way too. I can't imagine what it would be like. I mean, I know to a minor sliver from some of the comments that I see about myself, but I can't imagine what it would be like to constantly have people berating you and telling you you're not wanted, that you don't belong in the place that you live. We talk about the people who grew up here and have lived here in the point in time count. It's very evident that the majority of the people who are on our streets are from this region. They're not all from Duncan. They're not all from North Cowichan or Cowichan tribes. They're from everyone around this table. They're from your areas too. And some of them, I know there's kids that I've worked with in high schools that I see out there. And it's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching for everyone. And we need a lot more help and support from the province and the federal government about this. And we should never be put in this position where all we're doing is just sheltering people in the way that we are. And so, but this is where we are right now. And we need to advocate for a lot more from the other bodies of government to address this. And we have been doing that, but we need to raise our voices higher. As Alison Nicholson, Director Nicholson and I had a conversation about that later. And maybe now that it's at the CVRD table, regionally, we can do that in a different way. But I just really want to acknowledge how challenging this has been for all of you and how you've stepped up. And I'm sorry that these are the outcomes that you're being faced with. We have a cold snap coming up. You know, the chances of it changing really quickly to a new location are not high. And so I'm glad to hear that there'll be additional security in place for that time. And please know that we're doing everything that we can as the people around these tables to advocate to the province and to the federal government for the supports that we need in place to support the people in our community. As far as history goes back, there's always a group of people that, the rest of the community needs to make sure are kept safe and supported. And we, as a nation, have been really failing in that for a long time. And now we're dealing with it and an opioid crisis and all of the things that come with that on top of it. And it's hard on everyone. So I wanted to acknowledge that and thank you. And I am hopeful that we will get to solutions for this that aren't just temporary, as whatever it is going to be that happens next. But, and having a permanent shelter isn't the answer either. Having permanent housing and supports is the answer. And so I trust that we will continue to make strides to get there. And in the meantime, thank you everyone for everything that you have to endure while we get there.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins reminded me we were on the amendments. So if the board's comfortable, so the amendments were to add that additional security as outlined by Mr. Elzinga in the intervening period, as well as supporting the search for a commercially available space. And what was the other part, Mr. Robbins, of the amendment? By June 2024, right? So those are the amendments is the addition of the security piece and the permanent location. If the board's comfortable, I'll call the question on the amendments, and then we can continue our discussion on the motion as amended. Calling the question on the amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. That makes me proud. I'll move to the motion as amended. I've got Directors Segal and then Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this conversation it weighs so heavy on my heart. I'm a mother of 2 boys, and I cannot help think that every member of our unhoused community is somebody's child. And I get really frustrated when I hear about prioritizing one person's life over another. I think we are a small community, and no matter where this warming center is, we're still going to be dealing with these challenges. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough resources, but it is our community. I think we need to come together and try to create a culture of care. It's not ideal, it's what we've got. And yeah, I agree with everything that Director Staples said. And what I want to add is that I'm so supportive of more training and supports and anything for the CCC staff. As what Director Staples said, you've gone through so much. This is not the job that you signed up for. And so, I mean, we're in budget discussions. I'm very happy to support whatever you feel is appropriate to support your staff, not only in this moment, but going forward, because we have an unhoused population within our community that's not going away quickly.
Thank you. Mr. Elzinga, and then Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Segal, thank you again. The Cowichan Core Recreation Commission has reviewed the budget for the Cowichan Community Center for 2024, but staff heard your words, and we will consider if additional resources are necessary in this vein for bringing back at the February 9th board meeting.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't repeat what's been said. Great comments. We made the least worst decision that we could at the end of November. At the core of this is a housing crisis with a mental health and addictions crisis, and any number of issues combined, and plus we're being downloaded on. And I'm just wanting to implore that, we don't like being put in this position. We've been downloaded on before. We are trying our best to do the right thing, the next right thing. And it feels like we're kind of stumbling along a little bit, doing the best we can with what we've got. As I've been listening to everyone speak, I've been sort of coming to this sense of we can drag our heels, we can advocate and lobby and do all of those things, but what I'd like to ask of us as a group is to try and lead and be the best at this that we can. And if that's, it's almost like we're going to volunteer for bloodletting. It's going to cost. And I think all of us should know that it's going to cost and the solutions are going to cost. But this has just been vaulted into probably the number one priority in this region and for this local government. And I don't want us to be seen to be doing the bare minimum to meet the requirements that the province has laid on us, but I want to be seen to be compassionate and excelling and doing the best that can be done in this field. And yeah, it's going to cost, and all of us are going to be having budget decisions in the next day or two, and in the weeks ahead. We have to do this right, and I'd rather be seen to be leaders and doing absolutely everything that we can, as opposed to complaining and dragging our heels on this. I think that we've got talented people in this region that have been working on this file for a long time. I think we have to step up and each one of us and do everything that we can and on behalf of our communities as well, because as Director Staples has said, this isn't a core versus the outlying areas. This is all of us. So I'll just end with, let's do our absolute level best and come together to, short, medium, and long-term solutions that'll make us all be proud of the work that we've done looking after our friends and neighbors and relatives. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Director Istash.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be really quick. I just mostly wanted to extend my gratitude to Director Staples for what she said, and then follow up with Director Segal and now Morrison. I don't have much to add to it, so I thank you for your words. Those are exactly where my thoughts were. My only commentary is I really want to urge the board to not let words of bad or wrong be used for the decision we made. We made a good decision. We made the decision that was available to us, and I think inaction would have been the wrong decision. Some problems came about, but we don't know. We could have possibly, even one of those nights, saved a life. And that's what's important here. So I just really want to understand about the words we use are really important. We can always make another decision down the road, but my feeling for the way I voted is I felt we made the necessary, positive, and forward-moving decisions. So I don't take words lightly.
Thank you. I thought I saw a hand near the end of the table, but maybe that was, nope. Director Martman.
Thank you. So to add to the conversation is just sort of a philosophy of Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. And, I think we were looking at a decision around, some really basic parts of that hierarchy. And when we heard from public input today, you can also make the argument that there's another part of that safety piece that really puts it down at the very primary base of that hierarchy. And so I would be looking to, and yet I also heard from public input about understanding. They get it. They know that this is a real difficult issue and complex, as other directors have said. But is there a conversation that started between all those different groups that can be sort of built upon and help us understand, if not for weeks or months from now, but for next year, and that we can draw from the community, because I think it needs to be not them and us. I think it's a community of care and about engaging all groups. So I don't know if there's a way to do this, or if you thought about this, or maybe you're already doing it. So, thank you.
Yeah, I could probably speak to it, but I'll go to Mr. Elzinga.
I invite you to speak to it, Mr. Chair, but I was
Well, I
just
was
going to say
going to
there's a...
invite Director Staples to speak to it.
Absolutely, that's the other alternative, and just maybe I'll start by saying there's a number of organizations in our community that are trying to move this forward, and having the resources of the Cowichan Valley Regional District and set this as a priority would certainly assist in that endeavor.
Thank you. Yeah, and I see Director Staples nodding, and I would nod in agreement as well. The only thing I would add is I think that the challenge that we've gotten into, I think those like Director Staples who maybe are closer to this issue on a daily basis than any of us, is that we're still fighting through this system of triage and providing shelter rather than getting to the solutions which are providing people caring safe places to be. And until we move off of the scarcity model of providing base necessities to keep people alive and move them through that transition into safe housing, the dramatic need that we see isn't going to stop. It's going to continue to grow. But until the health, mental health, and addictions and housing resources are provided to the people that need them, we're going to continue to fight this vicious circle of mitigating impacts. So we'll do our best, and I think Director Morrison said our level best, reminds me of our former premier. Somehow I feel like I wish he was here right now. But until we get to that solution stage, we're going to have to continue to sort of fight and advocate the way we are today. But I think that what's on the floor right now is a big step forward to progress along that continuum or that spectrum of that community of care, as Director Segal said. I have Director Nicholson. Director Martman, are you good for now? Okay, Director Nicholson possibly to close, and then we'll call the question on the vote as amended, on the motion as amended.
Thank you. I'd just like some clarity on timeline. So we've talked about a benefit cost, and there's a lot of work around looking at what commercially might be available. I think the public needs to understand kind of a timeline on, because we're 10th of January, it could take us 2 months to find a place, which wouldn't help us.
I'm hoping that's not the case, but I'll put that through to staff.
Thank you through the chair to Director Nicholson. I think we're well placed in terms of our partnerships. As we were having this discussion here, I was able to send an email to one of our partners to say, let's get that group together. Let's have that conversation before the end of the week. These are all folks who have gone out and looked and have lists developed already of places. What the difference here is that we're not trying to fit this temporary solution into one of the two provincial funding models, neither of which allow for a property owner to be paid for a period of time for the availability and use of their facility.
Follow up?
So we can expect something at our next board meeting?
I would say yes.
And I might suggest, without any permission of my colleagues, that if something comes forward in a matter of days, I would support calling a special board meeting to consider it. I'll move to Director Abbott, and then once we conclude our discussion, I will call the question. Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to commend Mr. Wainwright for facing the onslaught of journalists and speaking exceptionally well on this matter before the cameras this week. And this is not the venue to posit ideas, but are you open to creative ideas from board members?
100%. I think initially we understand the needs that are in front of us and the need to continue this service to the best of our ability. But as we get into that short, medium, and long-term conversation, I think any idea that points us towards something sustainable, so we don't end up here next fall, is welcome.
Thank you. Any further commentary or questions from board members? Any other thoughts from staff before we call the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. As we conclude, I just want to say thank you. And I know particularly for a number of our staff members who are in the gallery and in our room today, it's been extremely challenging. Being put at the friction point of these issues in essence, between community staff and your board members is the worst place to be. And I appreciate that you've all conducted yourselves with dignity and being thoughtful to solutions, so thank you very much. That moves us a little further along in our agenda, Mr. Robbins.
We're going to go to Section 10, Committee Commission Reports. CR1 is a report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole meeting of December 13, 2023. This is for Director McGonigal. There are multiple recommendations for the board's consideration.
Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As these have been distributed and also published, could I move them as a block?
Please do. Do we
I
have a
shall
seconder?
move those as a block.
Seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all happened at committee. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
That
Mr.
concludes,
Robbins.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Detailed report, Mr. McGonigal. Director McGonigal.
CR2 is the report and recommendations of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December 2023. Director Morrison to speak to these, and there are a number of recommendations for the board, and then there's a section for electoral area directors only.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As per my learned colleague next to me here who indicated that there were items, oh, hang on, wrong one. I'll get there, promise. Electoral area services. We have a number of items, C1, C2, R2, and R6, 7, and 8 for everybody to vote on, and I would move those items unless someone wants them pulled.
Seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion on those? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison.
For electoral area directors only, we have R1 and R5, and I would move those two items.
Seconded by Director Abbott, or did somebody want one pulled? I saw a few hands. Okay, no, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
That concludes my report.
Fantastic. Mr. Robbins.
We'll move through. I just wanted to make a note under item 12, staff reports, SR1, and I know you combined that with the letter that you received earlier, and there was discussion on whether or not you wanted to directly respond to the letter writers. There was no motion. I just wanted to make sure that that was the direction that the board felt comfortable with the chair making overtures to those groups.
Yeah, thank you. I'll collaborate with staff on a response both to the letter that we received today as well as the Manor Hockey Association, who we heard from before. Based on our deliberations and discussion today, I'll talk with Mr. Elzinga, Ms. Miles Wilson. I'm going to pull Mr. Postings in just for fun.
Then we'll move to SR2, which is for your information. It is a report from the Finance Division with regards to 2024 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw 4541, which then reappears under Section 14 bylaws.
And to save Ms. Bowen from having to get up, for those of us who are new, this is an annual rite of passage or ritual to make sure that should monies be needed before we receive our taxes later in the year, that those funds are available. We're not just borrowing a big pile of money for no reason. It's a backstop. Mr. Robbins.
So then we will move to Section 14 bylaws. B1 is the CVRD bylaw number 4505, Couch and Bay Critical Location Street Lighting Service Amendment Requisition Limit Increase Bylaw 2023. Recommendation that third reading of said bylaw be rescinded.
Moved by Director Abbott. Seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed, motion carries.
And then secondly, that said bylaw be granted third reading as amended.
Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Moving to B2, CVRD bylaw number 4527, Recycling and Garbage Collection Rates Amendment Bylaw 2024. Said bylaw be granted first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Staples, seconded by Director Abbott. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
And secondly, that said bylaw be adopted.
Moved by Director Staples, seconded by Director Abbott. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
and B3, which is the CVRD bylaw number 4541-2024, revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw 2024, related to the staff report at SR2. First recommendation that said bylaw be granted first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Staples, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
And the second recommendation of said bylaw that it be adopted.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Justice. I saw his hand. He was looking a little meek there, but. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. I'd just like to get everybody's name in the agenda, in the minutes.
And we're going to move to section 15. These are bylaws for consideration for electoral area directors only. BEA1 is CVRD bylaw number 4529, development application procedures bylaw amendment bylaw 2023. That said bylaw be given first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Martman. Any discussion, Director Wilson? Oh, you're seconding it. Don't worry, you're next. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Director Monaghan can't vote on the EA bylaws, sorry.
And the second recommendation that the said bylaw be adopted.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Deck. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
And the final item, BEA2 under this section, CVRD bylaw number 4497, electoral area F, Cowichan Lake, South Scotts Falls zoning amendment bylaw 7531, Cowichan Lake Road, PID 012490920, 2023. That said bylaw be granted be granted third reading.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? I just want to comment, I think Mr. Robbins did auctioneer course during the break. Mr. Robbins, where are we now?
We're going to go by there 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20, which is question period.
So that takes us to question period. Be careful what you ask for. Mr. Robbins will deliver.
You provide me a platform, Mr. Chair. Question period is an opportunity to offer the public to ask a question regarding the business of the CVRD. The question period allows for an allotment of 15 minutes and is comprised of two parts. The first is reserved for questions directly related to agenda items. If there's time remaining, questions may be on a matter of public interest related to and in the CVR jurisdiction. Each questionnaire is permitted to ask one question plus one follow-up question related to the answer. The question must truly be a question and not a statement of opinion or speech. Questioners must avoid personal references, insinuations, violent, offensive, or disrespectful remarks about another person, and unparliamentary language.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Question period.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My question has to do, I pulled the page out, it's Section 10 Committee Commission Reports, CR1, Director McGonigal, R1, that the proposed South Cowichan Local Area Transit Plan 2023 be endorsed. My question is if members of the public or community groups have suggestions for improvements or innovations to existing bus stop locations, whether that's in the interests of safety or supporting our pollinators or creating community engagement. We have lots of ideas. How would we go about that process? What is the chain of communication?
Mr. Elzinga, are you willing to take those suggestions, or are you just going to respond? I was going to say I usually...
And I should mention that's Area B.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
I usually email Ms. Rondo, but...
I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, that there was an extensive engagement process to get to this point with the endorsement, but transit staff are always happy to hear from the public on any improvements, and I can certainly provide email addresses.
Thank you.
As a follow-up question, we are in a situation where we have put forward ideas and we've been put in a holding pattern. So I'm wondering if, as a result of today's movement forward on that plan, that we can continue that conversation with the staff member that we have started speaking with.
Yeah, you can. However, I will just remark that even when we adopted the plan or approved it to come to the board for adoption, always subject to the provincial government providing the necessary funding to move forward with those transit action plans. And that was highlighted quite clearly. Also highlighting, I think 5 years in a row now, we haven't had expansion funding, et cetera. So we're hopeful this year will be successful. But yeah, you can continue those conversations, not saying that you'll always get the answers you like in the short term.
May I speak to that ever so briefly, just to say that the CVRD knows whose jurisdiction that bus stop question is and has the appropriate, I guess, schematics in their possession. So that's what we're waiting to hear.
All right,
Thank you.
Any other questions for question period? I saw Mr. Evans put his hat on and leave early, so when you see him, Dave, tell him we missed him. And nice to see you as well. Happy New Year. I don't see any more folks coming for question period, so I think we can take a motion to adjourn. Just a reminder to those at home as well as in the room, we will be resuming our closed session after this meeting will take just a few minutes. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Nope. Mr. Robbins.
You will have a motion to go back into closed session, and then you'll come out of closed session and adjourn.
Okay. Motion to go back into closed session, Director Istash and Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We'll reconvene at 4:10. Stay in this meeting, please, for those at home and in the room.